My name is Manuel Castillo Mattis. I'm a moto taxi driver. A couple hired me to pick them up every night at 10 o'clock from the park in Nuevo Mexico. They were always my last passengers, and the route from Nuevo Mexico to Cristobal Obregon was a bit long, but I didn't mind because they paid me well. The only downside was that I finished work really late. One Friday, I went to pick them up like usual. On the way, I saw a man arguing with a taxi driver. It seemed strange, but I didn't pay much attention and kept going toward Obregon, where Mipa Singers lived. A little further on, I noticed a group of drunks, maybe even drugged, walking along the street. Anyway, I dropped off my passengers and I was heading back. As I made my way, I saw the same group of drunks again, acting wild, shouting like they were causing trouble. I kept driving, and near the Siegelmex warehouse, I saw the man who had been arguing with the taxi driver earlier. This time, he was alone, and he waved me down. To be honest, I was exhausted, but I thought maybe he just needs to go somewhere nearby. So, I slowed down and asked where he wanted to go. He asked me to take him to Tenochtitlan, which is really far, almost 12 kilometers, and half the road is dirt. It told him, "No way, man, it's way too late for that. I'm not going, and nobody else is going to take you either. You should head back because there's a group of drunks coming this way, and they might hurt you." The guy said, "I can't go back. I don't know where I am. I came here on vacation with some friends, and I got lost and the other taxi driver kicked me out." He kept insisting and even said, "I'll pay you whatever you want. Just take me out of here, please." I probably shouldn't have. Booty still said no. "I'm sorry, but I can't," and I drove off. I kept going, and along the highway before entering Nuevo Mexico, there's a big, dark patch off-woods next to a dump. Right there, I saw a woman crying on the side of the road. She looked like an ordinary lady, older, with short curly hair, neatly done. She was a bit plump, and she didn't wave me down. I remember that clearly. I thought about stopping, but I didn't want to get involved in something that wasn't my business, so I just slowed down, and as I passed her, my moto taxi suddenly died for no reason. I figured it was because I was driving slow, so I tried to restart it, but it wouldn't turn on. Then, I glanced to the side and saw that the woman was staring straight at me. Before I could say anything, she started crying and said, "Take my son, they're going to kill him." I swear, when I saw the look on her face, I felt sheer terror. My body started trembling and it froze completely. The woman got closer, and in the glow of my headlights, I could see her yellowish skin, no color at all, and her face was gaunt with deep, dark circles under her eyes. It was clear that she wasn't alive. She was a ghost or something like that. I turned forward and desperately tried to start my moto taxi again, while she kept repeating, "Take him, don't leave him there, they're going to kill him." I don't even know why, but I put it in reverse and suddenly the engine started. I was so terrified off seeing her that I sped toward where the guy was and shouted, "Quick, get in!" The gang was about 100 meters away from him, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw them start running toward us. I floored the gas, and they chased after us, but thank God, they didn't catch up. They were still a bit behind. My passenger and I were in shock, not saying a word. When we passed the spot where I had seen the woman, there was no one there anymore. Scared, I kept driving, and when I made a turn onto the straightaway, I looked over at Mipa Singer. To my horror, the woman was with him. She was smiling. My hands and feet went cold, and I couldn't stop trembling. I couldn't even brake. I'd never experienced anything like this before. I didn't know if I felt fear or amazement, but I swear everything froze. When we reached the Wana Castle, near a place called Ollie's, I finally had the courage to glance back, and the woman was gone. She had vanished. I breathed a little easier and stopped the moto taxi. The young guy immediately looked at me and said, "Please don't leave me here. I don't know how to get back. I came with some friends to a party, but we got into a fight, and we all ran. I don't know my way around here. I'm telling you again, charge me whatever you want." I thought about it, knowing I couldn't leave him there, so I just said, "All right." We kept going. It took me a while to calm down enough to talk, but I eventually made conversation, telling him that this place was dangerous at night and warning him not to come around here again, because that group of drunks would probably do something bad to him. He told me that when he saw them coming, he was scared and wanted to run but knew they'd catch him. He said he was so frightened that he asked his mom to help him because she had him 2 weeks earlier. That's when it all made sense to me. I started asking him if his mom had certain features, and a young man, surprised, asked me how I knew what she looked like. I told him, she was just with you, and she's the one who sent me topic you up. He broke down crying with such deep sadness that it almost made me cry too. Finally, we reached his home, and I said goodbye to him, telling him, take care and let your mother rest now. He was so grateful, even wanted to give me a hug. That was my experience. I lived through it myself. No one told me about it. It's completely real. That woman had sent me to protect her son. Continuing on our gloomy path of terror, we come across the story of Miguel, who tells us a shore experience as a bus driver. My name is Miguel Salinas, and I've been a bus driver for nearly 15 years. I know every street, every alley in this city like the back of my hand. The night shifts always suited me. It preferred the quiet roads, fewer people, fewer complications. But a tear what happened a month ago, I've been questioning whether I'll ever drive again. It was a Wednesday, nothing unusual at first. I had my last route of the night, one that took meth rough the outskirts of town, passing through a quiet, isolated neighborhood. It was the Kindorf area where the street lights flickered, and you didn't see many people around, especially after dark. That night, my route started like any other. Around 11 p.m., I had a few passengers, mostly the regulars who worked late shifts. Iron faces, eyes glued to their phones, the usual. As I made my way to the outskirts, the bus began to empty until only one passenger remained, an older man sitting near the back. He wore a long, dark coat and a hat that shadowed most of his face that I noticed him right away, not because he was doing anything odd, but because I didn't recognize him. That was unusual in itself. After years on the same route, you get to know the faces, the rhythms of people. This man was different. We were about 20 minutes from the end of the route when the rain started. It wasn't just a drizzle. It poured suddenly, drumming hard against the bus roof, reducing visibility. The roads ahead were slick, and the air inside the bus felt heavy, damp, almost suffocating. I could see the windshield wipers struggling to keep up, and a fog was creeping across the glass, making it harder to see. The older man hadn't moved or said anything the entire ride. He just sat there, staring out the window, though there wasn't much to see. Something about his stillness made me uneasy. It turned onto a stretch of road that I always hated, the kind where the streetlights were spaced too far apart and the shadows between them seemed endless. As I drove, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and to my surprise, the man was no longer in his seat. I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly scanned the rest of the bus through the mirror, but there was no sign of him. I thought maybe he'd moved to the front. But no, his seat was empty and the doors hadn't opened. He couldn't have left. Trying to stay calm, I slowed down and checked the mirrors again. Nothing. But just as I was about to brush it off, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. My hands tightened on the wheel and I froze. There was no mistaking it. It was like someone was standing right behind me. I couldn't turn around. I don't know why, but every instinct screamed at me not to look. Instead, I kept driving, focusing on the road, trying to rationalize what was happening. The rain pounded harder, and the wipers squeaked violently across the glass. My knuckles were witty on the steering wheel. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw movement. Slowly, the old man's figure reappeared in the back of the bus, but something was wrong. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and eyes, they were fixed on me, dead, blank, almost accusing. My stomach twisted, and I felt the cold seep deeper into my bones. Before I could react, the bus lights flickered and went out. I was plunged into darkness, with only the rhythmic sound of the rain and the faint glow of the dashboard to guide me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I desperately tried to get the lights back in. When they finally flickered to life, the old man was standing right behind my seat. His face, pale, lifeless, was inches from mine. His eyes bore into me, wide and hollow. I could see the faint outline of his skin, almost translucent, stretched over sharp bones. He whispered something, his voice raspy, barely audible over the rain. "You should have stopped." I slammed on the brakes, skidding the bus to a halt. I turned around, ready to confront whatever this was, but there was nothing. The bus was empty. My hands shook as I sat there, the engine idling in the middle of the road. I told myself it wasn't me imagination, exhaustion maybe. I had to finish the route. But as I reached to put the bus in gear, the rear door slowly creaked open, even though I hadn't touched the controls. Cold air rushed in, and with it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Soft, deliberate. I didn't wait to see who or what it was. I floored the gas, speeding down the empty road that my heart raced, and I didn't dare look in the mirror again. But I could feel it. Something was there, just out of sight, lurking in the shadows of the bus. As I approached the end of the route, I pulled into the final stop. I got up, grabbed my things, and stepped off Theus. The heavy rain fell, grateful to be done for the night. But as I walked away, it appeared that I could still hear that soft breathing coming from the bus. I turned back, and next day after telling my wife about it, I had to ask for medical permission to my boss since Ig had a terrible fever. Reaching the end of the video, our dear friend Alex from Colombia, a truck driver who shares with us his terrifying encounter in which he describes as his first time running into La Llorona, the crying woman. I'm Alex from Colombia, and I've been a truck driver for almost 10 years now. I've driven through some of the most remote, eerie roads in the country, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to what I experienced last month. That night, I was on a route I've taken dozens of times before, delivering goods from Bogota to a small town on the outskirts of Tolima. I was hauling a load of fresh produce, mostly plantains and coffee beans, set to be delivered to a small town on the outskirts of Tolima. It was urgent because the market was expecting the goods by dawn. .it was a typical job, about 6 hours off driving. The catch was the route I had to take was long, and part of it wound through desolate countryside roads. Narrow, winding, with cliffs on one side and dense forest on the other. It's the kind of road you wouldn't want to be on after dark. The booty needed the money, so I took the lift and left Bogota late. Around 10 p.m. all that mattered to me was that I had to make the delivery on Tomato, get the pay. The night was pitch black. The moon was barely visible through the thick clouds, and the headlights of my truck struggled to cut through the fog that had started to settle over the road. .it was the middle of the night, probably around 1 a.m., and the radio was my only companion, playing some cumbia softly to keep me awake. The road was empty, not another soul in sight. That's when I first heard it, a faint, distant wailing. It was barely audible over the engine shum, but it put me a little bit nervous. Probably it was the wind, maybe even an animal from the forest nearby. That was what I telling to myself mentally, but deep down I knew it was something else. I mean, I've heard stories of La Llorona growing up, just like everyone else. But they were always just that, stories meant to scare kids into behaving. I never gave them much thought as an adult. But that cry, it wasn't something you could ignore. It was filled with somic pain and sorrow that it made my skin crawl. I kept driving, gripping the wheel tighter, my eyes scanning the road ahead. The fog was getting thicker and visibility was dropping fast. I slowed down, not wanting to risk driving off the cliff. Yes, I rounded a sharp bend. My headlights illuminated something on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an animal, but as I got closer, I saw her. A woman, standing completely still, her long hair hanging wet and matted over her face. She was dressed in a white gown, torn and dirty, like she had been wandering for days. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a screeching halt. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I just sat there, staring at her through the windshield. She wasn't moving, but I could still hear the crying. It was her. Then, it was when I came to my senses and told myself, okay, I'm on, so think rationally, probably it's just a woman who is needing your help now. Against every instinct screaming at me to drive away, I rolled down the window and called out, Señora, necesita ayuda? In English, it is probably the same as madam. Do I need help? She didn't respond. She just kept crying, her shoulders were shaking, but her body remained completely still. I reached for my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Typical. I decided to step out of the truck, thinking maybe she was lost or hurt. As soon as my boots hit the ground, the crying stopped completely. The sudden silence was deafening, almost unnatural. I froze, unsure of what to do. Slowly, I approached her, the gravel crunching under my feet. Señora, I called again, my voice shaky. ¿Se encuentra bien? Are you okay? Then, she moved. It wasn't like a normal person, though. Her head snapped up, and through the tangled mess of her hair, I saw her eyes, empty, hollow, like black pits staring right through them. Her face was pale, gaunt, and her mouth was twisted into the most unnatural, agonizing expression I'd ever seen. And then she screamed. It wasn't just a scream, it was the kind of sound that freezes your blood. The wail was filled with such despair and anger that it felt like the air around me had turned ice cold. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were glued to the ground. I swear it. Just as she came within a few feet of me, I snapped out of my paralysis, bolted back to the truck, and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key, but when the engine roared to life, I floored it, speeding down the foggy road, not caring about the sharp turns or the cliffs anymore. I just needed to get away. As I drove, I could still hear her scream, fading into the distance. My heart was racing, and I kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see her floating behind me, but there was nothing, just the fog and the darkness. I didn't stop driving until I reached the next town, where I parked the truck in a gas station and sat there, trying to catch my breath. My hands were still trembling, and I could barely think straight. The gas station attendant must have noticed how pale I was because he came over and asked if I was okay. I didn't tell him what I saw, did I mean? Who would believe me? But I knew what it was. I had heard the stories growing up, but I never thought I'd see her with my own eyes at La Llorona, the crying woman. They say she wanders the roads at night, searching for her lost children, and if you hear her cry, it's already too late. I still drive, but every time I pass through those lonely, fog-covered roads, I can't help but listening for the faint sound of crying, praying I never hear it again, that I'm sorry, but I swear that next time I see someone standing aside of the road in the night, I'm going to think twice to toast out my truck. Thank you guys for watching and your comments. TSIS really a great support and helps me to continue bringing up new stories for you. In this video, I want to great new subscriber especially to Gene Perez. Thanks for keep watching me videos and see you there in the next one. Goodbye.